Hello, I am John Nathan Jones, and we are in a new podcast, new show, here to balance out that breakfast for the nutrition of our hearts, souls, and minds, to make sure that we can have a conversation that is not so solution based, but also perhaps just communicative, just a conversation that says, what are we going to talk about when we're not talking about being solution based? Because what does that do? What does that bring? Do I have other opinions? Do I have other interests? The public needs to know. And the truth is, yes, I do, and I have, and they mostly revolve around becoming well to pursue and perceive those things in a better way, in a better light. And in the process of understanding how to make that happen for myself, how to manage those expectations within the way that I perform and the way that I understand language and communication, and not to underestimate the importance of body language, but to understand and to know that to be strict with yourself and tolerant with others means that might not be reciprocated, and that takes on a level of liability and accountability and responsibility usually reserved for chivalry and military and the patriarchy dynamic of how the family unit is operating. That is the way that I was raised. That is the way that our society and culture has organized the structure of dynamic, like women and children first, like we and regardless of how you feel about that, to understand that the construct is that was a really hard thing for me to learn as a young boy, an only child, multiple siblings along the way that weren't directly related or affiliated, but required to maintain that type of structure or understanding. And not because my dad's the king and we operate with that mentality. That is a mentality that anybody who operates within defense or the Department of Defense, or being a civilian or a dependent within that military and family unit structure, that's how it modifies down, that's how it breaks down, and you fill in along the way, like that is a thing that you either learn or you're politely you're politely ushered into where you need to go. And that's not for everyone. That's not all of life. That's not all of life for those people. Some people retire. Some people maintain their structure and their stability with what they learn through the process of self-alignment or becoming a unit or a team or a squad member, and then learning how to operate within a chain of command and custody and conversation. It's a lot of people get hung up in the conversation about what to do with that type of thinking, as opposed to how to navigate in that type of understanding. Like, not everybody grows up on a military base. Not everybody has to live in that understanding, and not everybody's parents get held to the accountability and responsibility that you are supposed to operate and present, whether they're present or not, at any point in time. Like, it's a very old structure that especially from my friends within the Black community, like, you not acting up in front of somebody's mom, or they're going to either tell your mom or whoop your ass right there. And that is very similar in a military base structure from the 80s and 90s that I experienced. That is not necessarily like a focus in my life. It wasn't a focus in my life until it became the protection and the defense of the way that people perceive communication, interaction, the patriarchy, men, and sex, in the conversation of sexual violence. And like, I've been victim to so many of these things that I'm beginning to understand as a grown adult with no children and nothing but myself to protect in this life, that says, ooh, it's an important conversation to have power and control over, but the second you lose that, you put more people in jeopardy and danger than you understand or realize or could fathom, because of the underlying understanding of what that type of engagement is supposed to be and what it actually is. It's very unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. It's very religious trauma and upbringing and understanding that still exists, whether you don't like it or not. And that some people have to go home to that and want to be able to mend that with their family, because we spent a whole 200 fucking years making sure that happened within the United States of America and globally for thousands of years. And so to not be a part of the mending of that is it's become so staunchly present in every facet and space within life, that They have established air freshener for that. They have an Ozium spray for that, and I understand how that works. You're trying to make recipes with sour milk, and you're not willing to refresh the milk supply as opposed to just not have the thing that you want and try to make something different, reinventing a wheel that other people already know and are enjoying without you, because they get to have the presentation of bigotry and hatred and racism and still operate within walking in within the Lord, because that is that design, that's that style. And the other part is that it's just repackaged and repurposed from an exact experience that we all had in the 90s. If anybody was like testifying to love and praise and worship, I mean, fully rely on Gaga at this point in time to understand that, like, that is the way that crowd management and crowdsourcing and crowd control is processed through that lens. You don't have to be a part of that lens. You're already in that crowd. So in order to understand, to be able to unwind from that, you have to completely unplug. You have to get off the internet. You have to rely on your own self-sufficiency and resilience, as opposed to leaning on whatever community or structure that you have, because they are reliant upon you, just like the internet is, just like AI is. It's all reliant and resourceful from your energies and your understanding. And so as I bring that understanding of awareness about like that is what nutrition and mindfulness is combating for me in my life. But I also don't discuss and talk about the fact that like that's a bunch of people that are claiming to understand what oppression and discrimination looks like, and they might and they could and they do and they probably will. But to understand that and raising so much alarm without a fucking solution in the query whatsoever, and that's intentional, and it's unintelligent, and it is undiscernible, and it's creating a division and a divide in the work that was so eagerly and carefully constructed, and the tapestry that was built over the course of decades of people's work. And you watch it unfold directly, like they're just literally unsewing all of the fucking AIDS quotes one by one. And so to know that there's a level of engagement of that I don't choose to interact with others upon, because they don't have the right mentality to be arguing it. They have the right speaking points, or they have a 15-second reel, or they have a unreal expectation of how to manage that conversation with people who don't want to manage the conversation. You don't have to be below the Mason-Dixon line and give a fuck about anybody's feelings. You have to give a fuck about the crops and where there's going to be sold and how much tax you're going to pay on that. That's about it. And if anything more than that, then it's political and it's pretty and it's dangerous. And to be able to be fortified in your own life, to know those things about ourselves, the way that I learned to recognize that that's the conversation that's being brought to the table is, not only did I grow up there, not only is that what it's presenting itself as, and people aren't recognizing that they're all jumping on board with the same conversation about something that they don't fucking know about. Out there talking about things that are racist and white supremacist without understanding that they're participation in the conversation without bringing the solution. Like, we can all go around and punch Nazis and say that we're not that thing that everybody's so afraid of that we're watching unfold right in front of our eyes. But then to turn that obstacle upside down means you got to turn yourself inside out. And in order to be able to have that conversation, we have to be fortified in nutrition and understand that our mentality is the thing to be working upon before you go and bring that to somebody else, to have the interaction about business mindset and mentality. And the way that I've learned to manage that expectation with myself is through podcast and curated, very specific, solution-based and therapy-first content and media. I think understanding the way that is derived, not how it's presented. People like Alex Cooper on Call Her Daddy, her Jane Fonda interview specifically, Paris Hilton interview specifically, same thing with Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard, Monica Padman. Pivotal, life-changing conversation, interaction from the perspective of the people who know about what free speech means, about like being polite is kind, but when you cross the line into telling me I cannot say something, some people feel a certain way about that. I don't have the same emotional reaction because nobody's ever not telling me what I can and can't say. And when it does get to that point, then I go directly to my articles and I understand exactly what 1, 2, and 3 are first. And if we get any further than that, then that's another interaction. But to know that about myself and to watch other people trying to tiptoe around that, because the weaponized version of this has become, which one are you going to defend? Are you going to say what you're going to say and be a little dick to all these fucking people out here that you don't know? Or are you going to stand up for what you think and what you feel and say what's coming out of you, because that's the version of expression that's not actually being produced by external validation and prompts? Because that's what's happened to Americans, and that's what's happened to the world, and that's what's happened to communication in society. and to focus on that what's outside of your control, to know that, like, to bring same thing with the podcast, that bring that version of communication that I say, I'm not going to say it, but I get it. It's people like Andrew Scholes and Mike Birbiglia and Ira Glass, and their ability to bring the same type of realization without the hatred of us or them, and or us versus them, or us and them, that is intentionally meant to be conflicting. Like, you recognize that, and we all got sold on allowing our brains to be conditioned to a 15-second version of that. Like, you just won't believe the things I had to go through for this click for the 5-minute intermission to the end, whatever YouTube video thing that y'all are watching, because that is not a normal version of communication. That's a normal version now of entertainment. And I think the conversation that I have imagined to bring to this space to balance out the content of what I'm putting out into the world is that kindness and consideration are not the same thing as liberty and expression. And in fact, kindness and consideration are designed to buffer the liberty and expression of what you would be able to bring to a conversation, so that people understand what version of you that they're receiving. And when it comes to entertainment, we get to play in that space to where you might be seeing a version of me that you might not receive, but that you might think is who I am as a person. And to not understand the difference makes us unintelligent and not my art unintelligible. And I see that in other people's experiences with their podcasts and their movies and the things that, you launch something out there, and then you got 5 you got 5 parent groups outside ready to take you down for every single interaction that you need to monitor for their own children. Like, that's a consumer problem, and we established that 30 years ago. So to know that about the interaction that has come right back around and repurposed and repackaged as corporate responsibility is ignorant to put onto the artists. And if we don't believe that, then stop listening to Prince. Stop listening to Britney Spears. Stop listening and stop doing and partaking and consuming the things from the people who told you this was happening to you 30 years ago and taught you step by step how to protect yourself from that. And it starts with the Articles of Liberty and the Bill of Rights and all of our constitutional rights. But it also it starts with one, it starts with you, and that's the same fucking story they're going to bring around over and over again. It's like, what are you presenting into the world? Because now you're risk management. And what has happened is that language has been confiscated and is now under review as risk management in all places. And it's not because you're not free to say what you want to say. It's because the internet has taken that right away from us, and we're all grounded and we're all being watched. And that's just what's going to happen now because of the level of technology. Even if you remove yourself from the space, you still already have put your imprint on there. And that's not what I give a shit about. That's the way it's viewed. And I mean, watch Wreck-It Ralph. Like, programmers know this, designers know this, and they designed it for that, to be that, so that it would be able to be a larger construct than you can manage or handle. So what we can manage and handle is the way that we speak and how we perceive that right for ourselves, how our ancestors perceived that right, and how that right is addressed between us. Like, if you know what you're talking about, very few people are going to come up to you and tell you about what you need to say. They might tell you how they feel about what you need to say, and they might get other people to come in and tell you what they think you should be saying. It depends on where your platform is. It depends on how many people are listening. And it depends on how many people are intelligently listening or how many people are intently listening. And so to bring that out for myself, like, besides, I'm not going to stroke my own dick here and like review my own shows and bring that out. I'm going to do that later. But I see it in others, and I see it in the way that presentation has brought me to re-understand how media is representing itself. Armchair Expert, working it out is probably the best place to know what I want this to look like. Like the way that they break down what their craft is. It doesn't have to be jokes. It's the understanding of the craft. It's the construction of the craft. It's the details. It's the tiny details. And to know that about the people who do the work. That doesn't have to be a podcast. This could be this could be breakfast. But these people know how to bring every single fucking ingredient and just the right amount of portion to bring the understanding of what you're supposed to be getting. It is spoon feeding you the information now instead of allowing you for interpretation, because interpretation has been hijacked and has been repurposed as presentation. That's AI. Like that's going to happen, and it's a benefit and a tool. The non-benefit is that, like, let's not forget that like all of these parent groups that we all established and decided, like, no, you need to go home and talk to your children. You don't need to worry about what they're watching on TV. You can turn that TV off and send their asses outside. And if you're not doing that, then you're participating in the problem, and then your opinion becomes devalued. And that's the way I view it. That's not the way that goes in a court of law, or how that goes in a business room, or how that goes with shareholders, or how that goes with, in the Disney boardroom. But that's not what we're doing here, and that's not what's happening out in the world. And that's why there's a conflict with where all the resources and the finances are going, because that used to be a couple of juggernauts out there, and now it's 5.4 billion people with their own individual streams. And so to diverge from that and to recalibrate ourselves into a conversation means understanding what the difference is between what I've been doing and what I will continue to do, which is our solution-based conversation about offering mindfulness the opportunity to breathe, because not all of us interact in that way. Not all of us interact with the opportunity to want to breathe and to bring it to a place where we can have the conversation, because some of us are ready, like immediately it gets really hot, and then all of a sudden you don't know what to do, and you have an expression instead of an interaction, or you have an altercation instead of an understanding. And there's always a way to bring that focus back into what it is that you want, instead of what's going to happen, or what you got to give in that moment, because all of those things can be separate, or they can be they can correlate, or they can absolutely not. But we don't want to ever confuse correlation with causation, and we want to make sure, as people who might be on our third or fourth or fifth strikes in the world, because we're older, and we had a different version of this. This used to happen in person, and now it's happening on an undeletable database, where people are now able and actively letting you know they're saving, utilizing, and weaponizing that against you and every single thing that you'll ever be affiliated with or touch for the rest of your life. That is a global web. So good for them for achieving the goal, but to make sure that we have our own fortitude within ourselves to speak with our own experience with that. You can unplug all you want, but that doesn't mean that experience is not valuable, and it doesn't mean that those tools are not great. It means that your relationship with what that does and how that interacts needs to have a realistic approach and an expectation that's manageable for you. You're not going to be sold that. You're not going to be told that. You're not going to be given that in the terms and conditions, which will change daily. But to treat yourself with the understanding that, like, there's a participation in that. We could take a lot of note from the Amish. We could take a lot of understanding from the disassociation from the the technology and technological interface is a very specific thing to need to understand what it is, as opposed to being forced into learning how to adapt to it. That's not happening, and I'm not going to do anything about that for myself other than bring awareness to that's not the way that I do this. So, like, if somebody's trying to come up here, like, it's kind of like almost like you don't get to go play outside if you didn't finish your homework, but you're still on your video game, and then you tell your friends that you didn't go play your homework, but you're just really actually playing a video game, and nothing is getting done and accomplished. You're not interacting, you're not socializing, and you're not doing the work that's requested or required, and your resources of self are being drained to fuel a thing that is not real. So what is available to us in this conversation for John Nathan Jones, to bring Nate as like that, like that's the kid that I take to the gym. That's the guy that I've been my whole life, who's this, little, my grandfather is John Nathan Jones, my dad is Jack Jones, and so I've always been little John. I and okay, and or Nate and Nathan, and I wanted to be John so bad that I went only by John Jones for so long. But to understand, like, the young kid in me who thought that he needed to be so grown and adult, and aside from the 90s three name Dream Queens that we all thought we were back then, John Nathan Jones has less strict understanding of what that strict understanding that young me has been brought up in. And it's not to, like, I guarantee you that my parents are looking at this conversation going, I've said that, but he's never done that. And understanding that, like, it's not even just them. It is a way that children who grow up in a military environment are conditioned and trained into understanding, to be aware, to be alert, to be reverent, to be respectful. And the difference is, like, to present that. Not everybody lives in that space. That's what military people are supposed to be living in that space. That's what you get trained and conditioned and understood what chain of command and custody looks like. But they don't understand that is, and I'm not saying it as a negative. Like, church does it way worse than that. But, like, it's indoctrinated into your upbringing And to know that that same type of enrichment behavior is the thing that was missing in the 90s and 2000s. Like, you saw the negative behavior, and now we're all presenting that as if it's okay. You didn't see the hours and decades of work that went behind one, that got destroyed by one stupid headline for somebody out in high heels at 3 a.m. with their sidekick. Like, and to conquer that understanding is different than conquering, like, avoiding paparazzi and not getting pictures, or not being present in the news, or understanding how you've become a victim of a news cycle. Like, that in and of itself, like, they've shifted the parameters of how that is protected and what that protection looks like. And to know that about speech, and to know that about expression, and to know that about understanding, means that we've had to be solution based for so long to establish the understanding of expectation. Like, not only do I know what I'm talking about, but I can say the dumb shit, I can say the wild shit, and I can say the nice and the good shit, and I can put them all together and understand which one goes where, because I've been forced to understand how to adapt within that type of lifestyle. But so is the whole fucking world, and so is everybody else. And the problem isn't that they don't know how to do it; it's that they're not doing it with the, like, y'all want to sit out there and yell boomer at the people who have the money that you want. And so to know that about the younger generation that were young kids when I was a kid, that are now in their 40s, Paris Hilton is very specific to me. Like her process, her traumas, and her healing and journey of recovery from trauma. Don't care about her personal life. Like, I visually watched her trauma, and I visually watched her recovery, and the language that she uses, and the understanding that is there. Same thing with the people who you would think were the douchebags back then. Like, Dax Shepard in and of itself is an understanding of what male men should do to grow. Will Arnett in Flaked is an example of what male men should do who need to stop drinking yesterday. And knowing that that is present and not being discussed and reiterated and recirculated every 30 seconds instead of whatever the hell else the other dumb shit is. Like, they're both fine, but one is great and the other is there. And to know and to have that conversation is not lost on me. That, like, it, what wouldn't be lost on me is that the people who know me in my life would look at a situation they haven't been present for in over 7 years and be like, that's not him. But it actually is. I treat my success of sobriety the same way I treated my success in addiction, because I'm a survivor of 25 to 30 years of chemical and alcohol addiction. And to know, and not just that, but like the side effects of that, and the side effects of life that come with that, and the loss of relationship, and the loss of humanity and self, and physical well-being. And to have not suffered through that, but to shift that all into learning situations and coachable moments, is a really fucking hard transition to make in anyone's life, but especially to do it alone, and then to be watching everyone else around me and be like, I'm not alone. That's exactly what they're fucking doing. They're literally turning an entire ship around within the confines of a Panama Canal, online, like in public eye. And I think it's commendable, and I think it's brilliant, and I can't figure out the words to say about it, other than like where the kids that liked you in elementary school, they'd be like, your epidermis is showing, faggot, bitch. And then run away and be like, okay. And then you're sucking their dick later at the fucking ABC parking lot out there, and in college. But either way, like that is how people used to communicate. And now it's become such a negative interaction. You want to bring the fuck you, bitch, first, without being like, hey, girl, are we friends? Okay, then fuck you, bitch. Like, however that conversation goes. And it is completely a language barrier about emotion. And so we've covered emotion for the last several weeks over at Solution Based Nate Supplemental, and to know that morning has been that morning has been owned and owed for a long time. But it was a long time coming to take a break from understanding the solution and the emotion, because you can only resolve so much without going back into what needs to be resolved, and that's different from revisiting and relapsing. Because I'm not doing the thing, like, that is the cycle and the pattern of therapy needing to be present, that a lot of people don't understand in their expectation management. Is like, some of us need to do the thing again to recover from the thing, to feel that good about the recovery. And some of us need to revisit the reason that we're in recovery, or the reason that recovery was necessary, or the reason that we don't have the relationships that we have, or they're different. And that's not the thing that gets explained in any of the groups, or the other things that like yeah, that might be happening and someone can guide you through that, but nobody tells you that. Like, are you reliving, or are you relapsing, or are you revisiting? And to know, like, okay, if that's possible there, if I can not be confused in that idea, Maybe I can be confused in my emotion. Maybe I can be confused at why I'm where I'm at. Maybe that's that alternative perspective and alternative action of interpretation that people are trying to bring to the table for you. And a lot of us then look at that as choice and decision. And when I see that from somebody else, like specifically Jane Fonda's interview on Call Her Daddy, Paris Hilton's interview on Dax Shepard, Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard and Monica Padman, and Wobby Wob, and the like there have been so many on that specific show of interview that feel almost as if like you start with Dr. Christopher Palmer and listen to every other expert on expert for like a year and a half or 2 years or so, then then you find like an actual cognitive behavioral therapy arc in alignment that shows so many different people's versions of how they got that understanding, not got better at it, got the understanding that something needed to be done, and there was actually already a formula there. Like most of us sit in this world trying to reinvent a wheel while everyone is doing the same wheel right in front of you. We don't see it that way, and we don't interpret it that way, or at least I didn't, and I didn't for a really long time. So I've set that commitment here to know that the conversation can be just as serious and informative without having to be as focused on one thing, which is self, and can be focused on how I've nourished and enriched my self focus through others. So I'm not going to bring, it's almost all music and very specifically like curated podcast content that from very specific people, comedians, directors, actors, experts, and Paris Hilton for publicity understanding. Like I don't need to be in a paparazzi view, but I need to understand how someone can hold themselves high while and hold people still in positive esteem while having been browbeaten from society on front page for our entertainment and disposal. Like I don't buy into that, but I wanted to be a part of it because I thought that's what fame looked like. I've definitely fallen into traps that weren't on page 6, but I know how I know what strength looks like, and I've actively deconstructed where that strength has now shown itself to be billions and babies from that back to how you got there or how she built her way there publicly also. So commendable and inspirational and aspiring, like to be that level of architect. So I don't want to be famous, I don't want to be blonde and skinny and rich and beautiful. But if anybody would like to fill in the application, that role is still available here at the studio. But I do need to know how that architecture is stable in the way that it is, because that's not what got billions of dollars. Billions, like Ingenuity and ADHD got billions of dollars. That resilience and structure and the architecture of how she knows where she came from and got herself out of something that nobody else even paid attention to until her documentary came out is so necessary for this upside down that everybody has tried to put onto the focus of reality. Not just the cutesy, not just the entertainment, not just the internet posts and culture. And so to engage in that's what I think this is supposed to bring. That's what I think that this is supposed to be. Either your therapy is showing or managed expectations, mischief managed, like and it's supposed to be a direct derivative away from solution-based thinking, like to be more impulsive and creative, not crazy but creative, because solution-based thinking is for the crazy and creative is for the foundation of being allowed to have solution-based thinking, and because they feed into each other. To understand the who, what, where, when, and why of what you see and what you want, we used to just hope to get there and figure it out later, and now we can actually take the path that is there, not because it's easy or it's done. People have done the work for us. We're not enjoying that work. We're so busy trying to reinvent our own wheels that we lose sight of what's important, and we lose sight of how to think about the things that are important. And so I respect my elders. I listen to my elders. I respect my peers, and in that understanding, like I'm still out there with the best of them, like booty popping and well, I do that at home. I do that at home between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. until the house is awake. But it's my own version of sobriety and recovery that is inspired through the camaraderie of the people that I've seen either like mostly the people that needed it, and that's important to me. Like I don't know what Will Arnett went through to need to be able to show us in the show Flaked, like what that needed to look like, what that needs to look like. It's a literal script to show you from matcha cup to getting on the bike in the morning, like why someone gets up every single fucking day. We don't have to know what their internal purpose is to know, oh, it's the routine. He has to get up and do the routine every day. Okay, there's one part. And to fill that in with the examples that I needed. It's not so much like, oh, my heroes are growing up. That is a huge part of it. My heroes started growing up and I needed to grow up, and I understood that needed to look a certain way. And I didn't understand that needed to look a certain way until it became necessary. Like 35 gave it a big like gave a big shout out to the ridiculousness of what life should look like and what I needed it to look like for me. Fighting what I didn't want it to look like was more work and more complicated than figuring out what I did want it to look like and making that happen. Because I knew what I was told things needed to look like. You needed a wife and matching Labradors and matching BMWs and white picket fence and a job of 50K and all of these things. And you know, I was sold on that Leave It to Beaver life in the 80s as well, like a lot of people were. And what I do see, and why I think this conversation about solution-based thinking and about First Amendment rights for sure, but like expression is important, because because not only have I been victim to brainwashing and conversion therapy and all of the other dumb shit that was so allowed back in the 80s and 90s that people don't even remember that we lived and died and fought for, but that now that's literally what's being reused against you without you understanding. Like this is further than the Matrix and robot wars. Like this is ignorance, and for the most ignorant individual to pop out from the bottom and be like, hey, that's ignorance. To know that well, I mean, that's rewarding for me to be able to detach and disassociate from that trap. It's a trap. But the fortitude of failure is the importance over there. Like to know that the fortitude of failure is important for solution-based thinking. I can bring that same concept over and be like, but the fortitude of failure is also important for success. And the people who are successful that went through what I went through are successful despite that. And those are that's the topic, that's the focus. And we'll figure out how we're going to call that. Right now, the working title is Your Therapy's Showing. And I would love to figure out how to bring that to a more executive function. But for the meantime, I'm going to go through some lists. I'm going to go through some shows. I'll make playlists of the episodes of things that are accessible. I utilize almost exclusively Spotify. I have a relationship with YouTube that is new. You know, I upload the recordings, but I don't interact. I'm not a video guy. I don't have a camera. I guess that's not true. I don't have a good camera, and I don't know how. You know, like if it doesn't look like the ones that are on there, then to me the conversation is what I think I'm saying, and the way that I need to listen to this is more important than what everybody else might see as I gesture emphatically about the things that I'm passionate about and find important. So to bring meaning and value to the words, you might just see like 2-second clips of an AI video. You might see me doing this and it being a still, and you just need to listen, because that's the energy and effort that I have to put into this until we get a production team up in here. But for the meantime, in that, I will hope that you find a way to relate to the routine of the things that you nourish yourself with, the playlists you listen to, not just clicking on Spotify's auto population, but make your own playlist. Be interactive with the app. Be interactive with the technology as opposed to constructed around it. Like, you don't know what those Jetsons are going through at the end of their day, and their emotions, not being able to interact, not being able to be pressure tested within your own physical body and vessel is not as fun and exciting as you think. Talk to some NASA space administrators, but also at the same time, that is what we're made to do, is exert ourselves. Our bodies are required to meet pressure and resistance to be able to come back and to build and grow and develop. That's how that works. And the same thing is true with language. The same thing is true with diagramming and constructing sentences. And the same rights and freedoms are designed for that to not be a topic of negotiation with other people when it comes to my ability and the necessity of what I have to say. You might not like what I have to say, but you can't tell me I can't say it. And that Cleveland that Cleveland rocks. But also, that understanding is more important than anything you do have to say. And that you might not feel that, and you might not be being told that, but that is what it comes down to when you get the guy in the robe and his gavel, and it comes down and it says, if you're violating the ability to say. Now, what you might be saying might be free speech, and that might be a civil issue. But to understand what that federal and constitutional issue looks like with your ability to say something, and what that thinking is like for the other people who want you to be able to say what you want to say, but as soon as you say something that goes against what they need to say, then all of a sudden you're interacting with the way that they feel, and then they're going to be able to negotiate that with you in their own way. And that is how people are communicating today. I don't think that's correct. I don't think it's effective, but that doesn't make it okay. But it's present, and that means that you have to understand and learn that. It's very similar to like people who have been in I have not experienced this directly. I've experienced the aftermath of people in interracial relationships where I've never been the white guy in my relationship, but I'm always the brown or mixed boy. But I've seen other people in mixed relationships where somebody drops a slur or community word, or someone and we have a conversation about how that communication goes, and to know that about like that, the formality of that that conversation was removed probably around 2015, and the rest of society has decided you need to already know that and be showing that level of respect to the people who are present in whatever they're everywhere, and they're always present, and they're always going to be if you're in that platform and on that place. And so to bring ourselves here in this YouTube environment is going to take a little work for us to be comfortable and being able to be in front of I'm not uncomfortable in front of the camera. I'm uncomfortable with producing, like I'm not going to sit here and worry about what I look like to say what we need to say in the conversation here. We can work on that elsewhere. So to be mindful about my own approach when it comes to understanding where I think other people's therapy is showing, and where I understand what I've learned through cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm no doctor. I'm not a therapist. I am a patient. I'm a recovered patient. I am a person. I'm a human. I'm a 40-year-old man who has been through some severe traumatic experiences with the most hottest gossip fucking techniques at the time that have all been proven to be wrong and harmful. And I know what to do about recovering from that. And so that gives me a little bit more insight and a little bit more understanding when it comes to institutional abuse, when it comes to complex abuse, when it comes to institutional complex abuse, and when it comes to their lack of wanting and willingness to do anything for the recovery of that, as opposed to covering up their participation and then stonewalling your access to your own information about the things that they put you through in the name of science or medicine or psychology. So as that continues to go on behind closed doors in other people's facilities, that does not happen any longer in my life or any of the facilities that I'm affiliated or associated with. And to know that it has and will and does and will have its own resolution is a thing that gives me the authority to be able to look into the same understandings of the same people who've been through the same institutional abuses through the same institutions that are still allowed to be in operation, and to understand that there is not only something that's being done about that we can remove ourselves from, but the healing and the recovery and the sharing of others' versions of that is so important. And not just like, oh, Paris Hilton has an adult voice and is smarter than everyone thinks. It's, oh, she put in the work, and y'all are so worried about about needing to know what that work is without doing it and without trying and without showing up for your own work, without getting on betterhelp.com, without making your own playlist, without feeding yourself breakfast, without showing up in the morning. And so instead of, nobody, that's a coachable moment for everybody involved, but that's over at Solution Based Nate Supplemental. And the host over there, Nate of Solution Based Nate Studios, be more than happy to introduce individual coaching for you there. But I, John Nathan Jones, JJ, John Jones, John J Nate PGH, because you know what? That's what I do. I eat and I leave no crumbs. And if I do, then we will scoop those up on our way. But to know that the reason that I'm so passionate about my own conversation over there is because of the inspirational and intellectual people who took time out of their comedic lives and personal triumphs to turn that into a therapeutic moment, should you be willing to receive it that way. So for the things that I've seen and the things that I've heard and the things that I have put on heavy rotation for my own healing process will be the original focus of what we can do here at J Nate PGH and the conversation about Well, about whatever we can figure out what to call it about without being like, your therapy's showing. Because it needs to be funny, it needs to be cheeky, and it needs to be cute. But we're also really fucking serious about making sure that your therapy is showing and that you're bringing your emotional awareness before you start bringing your opinions. Because that's very important in the world. Both can be funny, valid, and true. But one of them is being requested and the other one is being required, and neither of them are serving you in the way that you think they are. All right. I am John Nathan Jones. I go by Nate on our other channel, and over here we'll figure out what J Nate PGH needs for you to call him in order for you to show up here on this channel. Just don't call me late for dinner. All right, bye.